Welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening for our virtual genealogy program, starting out with DNA, using DNA to expand your family tree. I'm Pam Taylor, manager at the Harford County Public Library's Joppa branch. This performance is being recorded and will be available along with a handout at hcplonline.org on the HCPL Universe page through April the 24th. Now let's get on with the show. We're thrilled to have Jamie Lee McManus Mayhew return to us this evening. She presented DNA Demystified, a guide to cracking your genetic code during Genealogy Week back in January. And it was so interesting that we asked her to come again to give us more information on DNA. Jamie is a California native with deep Southern roots, a speaker, family genealogist, genealogical educator, occasional blogger, and professional researcher. She is active in numerous societies and organizations, currently serving as the president of APG Writers SIG, a director of the Genealogical Speakers Guild, and a director of Oakhurst, California FamilySearch Center. She holds a BA in sociology and an MA in educational technology and a professional learning certificate in genealogical studies. Jamie is going to be using PowerPoint during her presentation this evening, and you can adjust what you're seeing on your screen by using the screen view in Zoom. Please feel free to submit any questions via the Q&A feature in Zoom, and at the end of the show, I'll get to as many of them as I can. We would really appreciate it if you take time to complete the quick survey after the credits. We use your input to choose topics for our virtual genealogy program, so it's timing well spent, and it just takes a minute. So we really appreciate that. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Jamie Lee McManus Mayhew.
Thank you very much. Let's share my screen. All right.
You're good to go.
Thank you. Starting out with DNA, using DNA to expand your family tree. We talked about this a couple months ago, and today I'm going to do a quick review of some of the things that we covered in January because you need them in order to understand what comes next. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is DNA, 3 types of DNA tests, who can take each test, who sells each test, what do you get, and how do you use what you get, and some DNA strategy. I hope you enjoy it. So what is DNA? Deoxyribonucleic acid. Long word. That's why they call it DNA. It's so hard to say the whole name. It's a material in our cells that carries genetic information. We have, as humans, 23 pairs of nuclear chromosomes called autosomes. The 23rd pair is the sex chromosomes down here in the corner, which this happens to be the chromosomes of a woman because she has XX for her 23rd chromosome pair. If it were XY, it would be a male. Otherwise, all of them are pretty much the same. So a little bit more biology. During reproduction, the cell splits and you get about 50% from each parent. I said about because it's not exact. And the chromosomes recombine so that you get different parts of each chromosome when they split in half. Siblings do not get the same 50%, and you're going to see that in one of the slides coming up. So, what are the different kinds of DNA? The first one we're going to talk about just briefly is Y-DNA. It's a paternal test. It can only be taken by men. Remember those sex chromosomes, only males have Y-DNA. It tests the father's line all the way back, and it's frequently called a surname test. So here's our mother and father, with the father having an XY chromosome and the mother 2 X's, and their 4 children. They've given one of their chromosomes to each of their kids, resulting in 2 daughters with XX chromosomes and 2 sons with XY chromosomes. Notice that they are not the same X and the same, well, it is the same X and Y for the father, but for the mother, it's not necessarily the same X for each child. Come on, move. There. Why should you take this test? It'll help you find out about your earliest paternal ancestors. Test two men to determine if they're related on the paternal line. What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, you might get no matches. If you're from the United States, you will probably get matches, but if your ancestry comes from other countries, you might not get matches. And you might discover a non-paternal event. And that's when you find out that the expected names and the expected line is not what you got. Who sells it? Only one company. Family Tree DNA sells the Y-DNA test. They have different levels of this test. They have a Y37, which is the most general level test, and you can test at that Y37 level and then later update and upgrade it to either a Y111 or a big Y700. All right, so how do you use this test? Well, here are two young men. They are related on their paternal line to the common ancestors at the top. So you could test, if you tested each one of those, they should be a close match on the Y-DNA test. Mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, is a maternal test. It can be taken by both men and women. Remember, the males get one X chromosome and one Y chromosome, while females only get two X chromosomes. But that mitochondrial DNA exists for both men and women, but it's only passed down through the mother, and it will show you your maternal line. And usually, especially in our culture, surnames change on the way back. Why should you take the test? Well, it tests that mother's line. It doesn't follow the surname. It's best used to compare two individuals. And part of this is because mitochondrial DNA is very stable and it rarely mutates. So you could be very distantly related to somebody who you were only a couple steps off of. Who gives this test? Same as with the Y-DNA, just family tree DNA. We're going to spend most of our time talking about autosomal DNA, also called ATDNA. It's called a family finder or relative finder. It tests those other 22 pairs of chromosomes, and it can be taken by both men and women. It works basically back to third or fifth great grandparents level, about fifth to seventh generations back. So it's not going to work with very, very far back ancestors. When you're doing autosomal DNA, you use a measurement called a centimorgan, and it's abbreviated most times by cm. You can think of it as a measurement, but it's really not the same thing as, say, an inch or a pound. It's a rate of recombination, but just think of it as being a measurement. And the higher that number is between two people, the closer their relationship. So look at the shared DNA of close relatives. Your father or mother, you are going to share about 50% of your DNA with each of them. So you would have a match of about 3,400 centimorgans. Now remember, I said about. It might be 47 to 53. It could be, almost exactly 50-50, but it's not necessarily 50-50. Grandparents, you have 4 of them. So you get 25% or about 1,700 centimorgans from each of your grandparents. Your great-grandparents, you get half the amount. So you're going to get only about 12.5% or 850 centimorgans. And your great grandparents, you'd get only 6.5 or quarter percent or 425 centimorgans. So you can see as it goes back, you are inheriting less and less of each individual. Well, we don't normally see our great great grandparents. We see siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins. So, how are you related to those people? Your siblings, you're going to be related about 50%. That means 50% of your DNA you do not share with your siblings. So about 3,400 centimorgans are going to be shared with a sibling. Your aunts and uncles, you'll share about 25%. First cousins, it goes down to 12.5, and you can see down to fourth cousins, which it's less than 1%. So what's a cousin? Well, John is married to Mary, and John dies, and Mary then marries William. So John has two children Mary has two children with John, Susan and Grace. They are siblings, full siblings. They have children, and those children are now first cousins. Maggie and Jack, who are the grandchildren of John and Mary, are second cousins. I'm sorry, great grandchildren of Jack and Maggie are second cousins, and third cousins for Linda and Mark, and fourth cousins all the way down here at Brianne and Jacob. Well, William's only related to some of these children. So his first son, Samuel, with Mary, is a half sibling to Susan and Grace. William, the grandchild of our first William, is a half first cousin, and so on. Well, sometimes because of age differences, we're not directly related like a first cousin or second cousin. We are a removed cousin, meaning that we are a one generation or two generations different. So Susan and Grace are siblings. Their first cousins are James and Joyce. Well, let's look at James. Joyce has a child, Jack, and James and Jack are now first cousins once removed. Maggie and Jack would be second cousins, but James and Jack are different generations, so they are first cousins once removed. Then if we look at Jack, James, and Susan, they are another generation apart, and they are half first cousins twice removed. This is a chart that was created by Blaine Bettinger. It's free to use on DNA Painter, and it shows, you are in the middle there, and it shows how you would be related to other ancestors and just relatives of yours based on your DNA. It also shows the range that a person can be related based on the amount of DNA. The more DNA you have, the closer your relationship, and the less likely that there are a lot of different choices of what that relationship would be. But let's look if you had 47 centimorgans that you shared with another person. You can see from this chart that you've got a number of different possibilities of what your relationship could be to that person. They are going to be a cousin of some sort, but they might not be very close. If you look at the chart that Blaine has created, you can see with that 47 centimorgans how many different possibilities there are that you could be with another person. So when you're looking at another person and your relationship to them, another term you need to know is the most recent common ancestor. And this is looking back to see where do you guys Where do you match? Where is the common person that you are related to? So it's easy. First cousins share grandparents. Half first cousin would share one grandparent, not the other. If you're a fourth cousin, you would share a great, great, great grandparent. Those are your third great grandparents. You count the G's. So fourth cousins share great, 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 great grandparents. I'm sorry, fifth cousins share. So you've got 5 G's who share the fourth great grandparents. Who sells this test? Lots of companies sell this test, and there's a lot of different ways they do the test. Our Family Tree DNA sells it. Right now it's $79. I'm going to tell you that these tests go on sale a lot. We just had Roots Tech that some of you may be aware of, and lots of the companies were on sale during the week and the week after Roots Tech. So Family Tree DNA has one thing that they allow you to do, and that is you can upload. You can test at another company, and for free, you can upload your DNA to Family Tree DNA. And for an additional $19, which is a whole lot less than that $79, you can get a number of different tools. One thing about these tests is also the way you're testing. You can see here from the little picture that Family Tree DNA is a scrape test. They are scraping the inside of the cheek in order to get the DNA material. This can make a difference with who you're testing, because especially if you're able to test a very old relative, they may not be able to produce enough spit for a spit test. So who sells this test other than Family Tree DNA? 23andMe. They again are kind of expensive right now, but they offer a lot of good sales, and you can test through them. If you watch for those sales, you'll get lower cost for testing. You can see from the little picture that this is a spit test. And so it does require that you be able to produce spit. The next company that I'm going to talk about is MyHeritage DNA. They are still extending their Super DNA sale that happened through Roots Tech. And so it is still $33. As I said, all of these others go on sale at some time. MyHeritage DNA is a scrape test, so that might be an easier one. They used to allow you to upload your DNA through MyHeritage. That is no longer available. So you may find people who say, well, you can upload them. You can't do that any longer. All right, who sells the test? Ancestry. Ancestry is the largest DNA testing company. Right now, they are at $99 for the Ancestry DNA test. It was as low as $32, I think, in the last couple of weeks. So it is a spit test. You probably noticed when I went through, some of them said traits. So for additional amounts of money, you can get more than just your DNA results. You can find out certain traits that you might share with other people who have similar DNA to you. But that's not going to help you find ancestors. All right, one of the most important things that you get from a DNA test is an ethnicity test, an ethnicity results. It determines your ethnic composition. Now, how do they do that? It finds out where your family came from by looking at comparisons from other areas of the world, and they put them together and create a population. They're using their own proprietary populations and their own definitions of that ethnicity. I'm looking here at Asia. Asia is one that is different from company to company. And you can see that Asia covers a large area, and it covers a lot of different population groups that you might not think of as traditionally Asian. So Diane Southern, in her Your DNA Guide, has um, a chart there that talks about all the different ethnicities and how the companies define them and how they get separated out. So I'm a Northern European mutt. This is from Ancestry DNA. And if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see that Ancestry provides a maternal and paternal breakdown of your ancestry and then how it would come together to form you. At the bottom, it's highlighted the word all, but if you highlight different parts of it, it will show you different compositions. So I've here highlighted what I would normally think of as being the England, Wales, uh, Ireland, that's areas of the British Isles. And you'll see that the majority of my background is from that area. Both my mother and my father, their DNA, even though it's not exactly the same, is primarily from areas in the British Isles. And so my DNA has not been exceptionally helpful for me for finding other relatives that I might be related to. But my friend John has a different situation. Here's John's mother and father. John was adopted, and he did not know who his mother and father were. But if you look at their two ethnicity breakdowns, you'll see the colors are very different. If you scroll down on this same page, you'll see that they have a detailed comparison. I'm going to blow up a part of it. The top of it says that John has 26% of his DNA comes from Connacht, Ireland. 23% of his DNA comes from Munster, Ireland. His Connacht, Ireland is primarily his mother's DNA, and his Munster, Ireland is primarily his father's DNA. But together, John is 50% Irish. But what's interesting about his DNA is he has 17% Sweden, and that is only on his mother's side. So if you have 17% of your DNA from one region, that's pretty close to a great grandparent. So let's see how that could be used. Well, one of the things you can do is look at who you match with. And John matched with a man named Aaron. And Aaron is mostly from Norway, but he's from Norway and Sweden. And John is from Sweden and Norway. And looking at the map, you can see that these people might have gone back and forth between those areas, and there might be some blending of those two ethnicities. Well, when we finished discovering who John's parents were, what we found is here in the center is his mother. This is always fun to do because for privacy reasons, we try very hard to hide people who are living. So the middle person here would be John's mother. And this came from family tree DNA because not family search DNA, family search tree. They allow you to do a tree based on the country that the person was born in. And looking back, just right in here, you see that all of these ancestors for John's mother came from Sweden. So that DNA ethnicity helped determine who his mother was. Why are they so different from one company to another, though? Well, first of all, they are only predictions. We do not know any of those people in that third generation back. We don't have any of them. They've all passed away. So the predictions are based of what their ancestry would be are based on people who are alive today. So each of your companies have different base populations. There was migration between areas in Europe and in Asia and in Africa. People moved from one place to another. So the ethnicities, even though they are primarily from one area, may have blended a little. And there's deep ancestry. We're not looking at the ancestry of your grandparents. We're looking at ancestry from a few generations back, at least. So, what if you're missing an ethnicity? You've always been told that you're American Indian, and it doesn't show up at all. Does that mean the family stories are incorrect? Not necessarily. Let's look back at part of one of those other slides that we looked at to look at how much you share of each of these different people that you are descended from. And think about it from the other direction. If you are sharing 6.25% of each of your great great grandparents' ethnicity, you are not sharing over 90% of each of those individuals. And that's how, over time, a small amount of an ethnicity, say one great great grandparent who was a full blooded Indian, can disappear in your ethnicity counts. All right, we're going to look specifically at some of the different companies and what they offer to help us to determine, to extend our ancestral lines. I'm going to start off with MyHeritage DNA. And I have a question. You should always have a specific question. My question was, who were the parents of Isaac Walton Orr, born 1824 in either Alabama or Texas? Nobody knows for sure. They moved back or could have moved back and forth. Isaac Walton Orr is the second great grandfather of my Aunt Laurie, and I was very lucky Aunt Laurie has passed, but I do have her DNA, and his parents would be her three times great grandparents. And that's a very doable range to use DNA for. So what can you get from MyHeritage? Well, one of the things you can do is auto clusters. Now, you're going to look at this auto cluster, and we're going to see an auto cluster from Ancestry later on. But you can see there's a lot of little boxes all over, and there's quite a few of them. And that's because MyHeritage and I do not have that many shared DNA matches. MyHeritage is not as large a database as Ancestry, and so there aren't as many matches. But if you look at this, you'll see that even though it says this is a cluster, if you look off to the side, you'll see this cluster, which actually is right here, probably belongs together with this pink cluster up here. So some of these gray ones that are off to the side are outliers. They're people who match some of this box. And here they match here with only, these people all match each other. These people only match some of the people in here, and they only match some of the people here. All right, what else do we have? Well, one of the things you get from MyHeritage is a theory of family relativity. And that's a little bit, it takes the trees of the people who have put trees into MyHeritage, and it combines them together, and it tells you a theory of how you might be related. This is me, and I have 92 DNA matches that have theories at MyHeritage. And this is how it's presented to you. And I know when I first looked at this, I thought, what in the world is all of this? Well, the way you read this is my tree on MyHeritage. This is another tree that is there on MyHeritage. And these two people here from this tree and my tree, MyHeritage thinks are a match. And I could click on this green button and see more information about how they might match. This person then matches with this person in another tree. So MyHeritage is saying this tree probably belongs here. All of this moves over, and then another tree has a match here. And eventually we get down to my match at family tree, at MyHeritage DNA. That's how you look at the theory of family relativity. So what else do we have? And what all of them have is a list of matches. Now, one of the things that you can do, I told you at the beginning on MyHeritage, is you can transfer. And I I tested my brother and my sister, and I transferred their DNA to MyHeritage. So they show up as the first two. And then I transferred my Aunt Laurie here, and she shows up as the third one. I know all of those people. But as you go down the page, you come to people who I don't know. So let's look at Linda. Linda up here has a theory of family relativity. So let's look at it. It's similar to the one that I just looked at before, but this one is a little bit more compact. And when it all comes together, it looks like this. And this is what MyHeritage says, that Linda and I are third cousins. This is my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my second great-grandfather. And these are our common, my great-great-grandfather and my great-great-grandmother are the same as the ones for Linda. And that's how we related. Now, what can I do with that? Well, if I wanted, I can contact the people that I find through this, and you may find that that is the person who got the family Bible. That's the person who inherited the pictures. That's the person who has letters about your ancestors. Now, the amount of shared DNA that I have with Linda is a pretty good amount. And so when you look down on the pages on MyHeritage, it shows the possible relationships. And there's a almost 50% chance that we are third cousins. And we are. But there are other choices that we could be, and it does show you those. And sometimes you will find that you are not part of that 50%, you're part of something else. It then gives you shared ancestral surnames. Well, the only shared ancestral surname we have is the name Way. And I have quite a few people in my tree, but this person, Linda, that I'm related to, has a very small tree on MyHeritage. But we do have shared locations, and our shared locations are in the South. So one of the most useful things that exist in many of your DNA testing companies is finding out who shares a match with you and your matches matches. So using my matches, I can see that this person here is my third cousin or fourth cousin, and it is Linda's fifth or fourth cousin. So this can help me figure out how a person is related to me. Family tree DNA has a different setup than you have at MyHeritage. You can, as I said, still transfer your DNA from other companies. You can see that up here in the corner, or you can take their Family Finder test. You get a lot of things from Family Tree DNA. You have your matches, you have your My Origins, which is your ethnicities. You also have chromosome browsers and chromosome painters, and this shows how you are related to somebody on a specific chromosome. That is a more advanced level talk than we're going to talk about today. All right, so let's look at how I am matched to the people on Family Tree DNA. The first one is my brother, and I had transferred his DNA over, and we are still full siblings on Family Tree DNA. I have here a few other people that I'm related to, and you'll see how quickly I went from matching at 2,700 centimorgans to 315. I don't have a whole lot of matches here on Family Tree DNA. And to the right, it shows the match date. The last time I had a match on my Family Tree DNA that was of any significance was about 4 years ago. All right. So this is when I talk to you about how many that you are only getting 50% of the DNA that you share with a sibling. One of the things you can do on most of your DNA websites is to see people who do not match with you and another person. So here's my brother Craig, and these people are all people who he and I do not match with. I'm a match for these people, but he isn't. The highest centimorgans is 77 centimorgans. So these are not in common with my brother and myself. And once you get down into the 40s, there are quite a few people that do not match both of us. And so this is one of the reasons it is helpful to test all of your siblings. It's called coverage. And when you are, because you only get 50% of the DNA of your parents, and think of it as a great big ball or bubble of M&Ms, and you get 50%, your brother gets 50%, and your sister gets 50%. Each time you dig into that bowl, you get different M&Ms. So and you leave 50% of the M&Ms there. So you can see that it is significant how much you do not share with a sibling. But it's not the close relatives. 77 centimorgans is not that close. It's a couple cousins down. Ancestry DNA has something called ancestral journeys. And this is a more close relationship than when you're looking at your ethnicities and you're looking at distant relatives. And my ancestral journeys are all in the South. They cover the areas of Alabama, Georgia, Missouri, Mississippi, a little bit of Georgia. So you can see that you'll get ancestral journeys like this. If I had put up my husband's, he has two separate ancestral journeys because his father's side came from New England area, and his mother's side, they met here in California, is from the South. So they have different journeys. One of the best things you'll find on Ancestry is through lines. Now, people kind of talk about through lines and they say, well, it's not exact. Well, and it may not be true. And that's true. It is what these people are all people that I share DNA with, and they are related to me in some way. Ancestry, by looking at our trees, has said that this is how we are related. And so this is just part of that William Monroe Harris that I showed you before. I'm going to show another little part of it. And you can see from here that they've used an algorithm and they've used AI to create a tree that has said that MP is the child of Richard Dent Pace. They have nothing to prove that, so it has the word evaluate. This one, it says that this person is the child of someone who is private. We don't know what their name is. And the grandchild of Martha Pace. These are all people who are related to Ida Orr, who married a Pace. So when you're looking at your the true through lines, you will likely get ones like this where it says evaluate. It's not positive and it might be wrong. As the trees get better, it's more accurate. I find that most of the time the through lines are correct, but as you get farther back, they may not be. All right. Laurie, again, my Aunt Laurie, has a match through that through lines. Her name is Tennessee Woman 1. And we share predictedly, my aunt and TN Woman 1 share an ancestor, William Monroe Harris and Harriet Caroline Walker. And if you hit on view relationship, it would show that relationship, how they predict that we're related. But look at the tree that TN Woman has. It's really not very big. There's not too much on here. There are some Harrises, and that's where the algorithm and AI created a tree and determined that Laurie and TN Woman were probably related. Well, how can you work with that? One of the things that you can do is you can use the shared matches. So these are all people who are shared matches with Laurie and TN Woman 1. And one of the most useful ones is this one right here, who is a nephew of TN Woman 1. Sometimes you'll do this and you'll find a child or a parent or a sibling that can help you to determine how you are related to that person. So let's look at another person on that I was trying to use to help me discover who that parent is of William Monroe Harris. Well, TN Woman and Laurie have a person that they are both related to, whose name was D. Harris. Now, D. Harris has passed away, so I can show his name. I try not to here, but let me tell you, putting in all of these little squares covering everything, I may have missed some. But he is more closely related to TN Woman than he is to my Aunt Laurie. They share only 61 centimorgans, and they share and he shares 123 centimorgans with TN Woman's and there's a prediction that he is a second cousin once removed, or a half first cousin, or a second 2 times removed. Well, what are we going to have to do? We are going to have to do some genealogy. We need to fill out this tree over here. And I did that and created a tree for D. Harris. And I was only interested in the Harris line. I used the genealogy records on Ancestry to create a more developed tree. And I came across this person, Edward Connor Harris. Now, Edward Connor Harris is not in my tree. Had never heard of him, but there he is a little better. He's got his son is Henry Kirk Harris. Well, I have a John Kirk Harris in my tree. So that kind of, that was something that made me think maybe there is a relationship here between Edward Connor Harris, because I know that my aunt is related to D. Harris. She's related more closely than I am. So I created a Ancestry hypothetical person. And you can see I put up here, I'm actively researching, and this is a hypothesis. This was done 3-4 weeks ago, and people have already started to copy it onto their trees, and that worries me because I don't know for sure if this is right. But what I did was I researched Edward Connor Harris, and I found his children, and then I put my William Monroe Harris in here. There is a William M. Harris that came from a 1950 United States federal census. Well, could this William M. Harris be my William Monroe Harris? There's a letter that I have that came from another descendant of William Monroe Harris that said that the family story was that William Monroe Harris had 3 brothers, John, Henry, Jake, and a sister, Molly. Their father married after their mother died and married a woman who didn't like the kids, and that as soon as they could, they all left home. So let's evaluate that a little. First, we have this where William Monroe Harris might fit in here. And we have Mary McKay Graves. She died in 1832. Her youngest child, known child, was Nicholas Harris, who was born in 1831. Now I put in Molly, John, Jake. I put William up here, Monroe Harris, and I didn't put in Henry because there was already a Henry Harris. So could this John Harris be this John Graves Harris? Could Jake Harris be one of these other male Harrises? And is Molly Harris really Louisa Harris? I don't know at this point, but I do know that after Edward Connor Harris's wife died, he married Emily Carter, and by 1834, that is when William Monroe Harris was 11 years old, she had her first child, and she did have 5 children. Those children would all be half siblings to my William Monroe Harris and these other people who may or may not fit in here. And this is now something that I'm actively researching. One of the ways I'm doing that is to use Ancestry Pro Tools. And there's a number of things that you can do with the Ancestry Pro tools, one of which is to create clusters. Now, this is just a general cluster using my aunt's DNA, and you can see that here again, we've got this area right here that these people may actually belong up here. We don't know that for sure. We'd have to look at them a little more. But you can also, with the clusters, you can take the DNA and you can create a custom cluster. So I'm looking at my Aunt Laurie and the her one match and seeing how they cluster together. And this is what I get. When you as you open them up, you see the lists again. And you can see as you go, when you look at Dudley and you look down, there are different groups of where he matches with my Aunt Laurie. And then I added a third person. You can add, they're called sidekicks. And you create these custom clusters. And what do you do with those clusters? Well, those custom clusters give you more people to research, to see how they fit in to the tree that I'm developing, to try to find out who is the father of William Monroe Harris. So what have we done here? We looked a little bit, went over what DNA is, the types of DNA tests, who can take those tests, who sells each test, and what do you get. Then we looked at what you get when you are looking at autosomal DNA and how you can use that to find lost cousins or discover lost ancestors. Thank you. Do we have any questions?
We certainly do. Thank you so much. That was a whole lot of information. It seems like that time just flew right by.
Yes, I had to have my phone out here to make sure I didn't go over.
Yeah, that's it. So the first question actually is from your last presentation that we had back in January.
Okay.
So somebody watched it because we record it and we keep it on there for a few weeks. And so she asked, I watched the DNA Demystified presentation. The companies you talked about only mentioned buccal or spit samples. Are there other companies that would test the oldest relative's toothbrush, hairbrush, a ring she wore all the time, or dirty article of clothing? Things that DNA can be gleaned from.
Yes, there are companies, but they are not companies that are generally selling to the public. You can use them, you can get them. You will pay a pretty penny for work like that to be done now. I mean, I'm talking probably thousands that you would pay. You would pay quite a bit more. I have not seen much showing up on any of the people who do DNA talks about results from those, because not many people are doing that. But yes, that is available. Yes, it can be done. It's expensive. It's difficult.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that follow-up. Next question. Do you have any DNA genealogy books that you would recommend to people to take a look at that are just starting DNA research?
Well, yes, I do. And I put them into my handout. One of them that I use quite a bit is, let's see, it's got to be right next to me. Oh, you can't see it. Anyway, it's Your DNA Guide, the book by Diane Southern. It's an easy read, and it'll give you a lot of information about getting started with DNA. There is a Your DNA, Blaine Bedinger, I think I have one, and there's 4 of them in the handout.
Very good. Thank you for that. And we have it in the handout, which is posted, and the link I think is in chat, or they will add it again to
Yeah.
chat for us.
But Your DNA Guide is really a good one to get started with, because
Okay.
she's very easy to read and very informative.
Very good. Next question. Do you recommend doing multiple DNA tests to maximize results and matches?
Yes, I have tested at Well, I've tested at Ancestry, MyHeritage. Well, no, I tested at Ancestry. My recommendation is you start with Ancestry. Ancestry has the largest database, and you really want to find matches. You saw that I transferred when they did transfer to MyHeritage, and I don't have a huge amount of matches. They're much more distance at MyHeritage. I also have tested at Family Tree DNA, 23andMe, and I've tested at, the English one that I offhand cannot remember. And I do have math, and by testing at all the companies, you're going to get people who only tested at one company
Makes sense.
because that's what some people do.
Mhm.
They test at one company, and if you aren't at testing at their company, then you're not gonna, you're not gonna match.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you want to test at the companies. Ancestry is the largest. I would suggest everybody tested Ancestry, but then the others, it depends on really what you're looking for. MyHeritage has a lot of European and people from other countries in it. So does 23andMe. And the one that has your ancestors, the one you want to test at.
Exactly. Here's your next question. How do you decide which DNA matches are worth spending time on when you have hundreds or thousands?
All right. I started off with the ones who are close, but you have to have a question. You have to have a reason for doing it. I mean, I could pick any that Dudley who I've looked at. I would never have chosen him. He's a 40 some odd match, Centimorgan match to me. He's a little higher to my aunt. But I created a tree, and as I started looking at the shared matches, I got a little cluster of matches that I didn't know anything about.
Mhm.
They weren't in my tree. And as I've worked with them, they all go back to that Edward Connor Harris. And I didn't have him in my tree. Nobody has. And I'm really hoping it pans out that he's the ancestor. He could be an uncle. And that would, but
Okay.
I haven't gotten that all done yet.
We'll go on to the next question. When different testing companies use different reference populations or algorithms, how should we interpret conflicting ethnicities, estimates, or uncertain ancestry percentages?
When you put your DNA in there, every once in a while they will send you something and say, we've recalculated your ethnicities.
Hmm.
They've been doing this for well over 10 years. I think
Mhm.
Ancestry started about 2012. And so as they have refined them, they've gotten closer and closer. You will find differences between them, but you're not going to, generally, you don't find huge differences. Where you will find the differences is in those small amounts of DNA. For a while, I had sub-Saharan African DNA. When that first showed up, I thought, oh, well, I have all these Southern ancestors. That could be. But it was less than 2%. And over time, it has disappeared from all of my ethnicity counts.
Wow.
So I was told when I had talked to someone from one of the companies, they said, it's probably an artifact. It's probably not really an ethnicity.
Oh,
So those are the ones you're going to find are different. You're going to get little bits of DNA that change.
thanks for that example. Here's your next question. What what grandparent would I share with a first cousin 2 times removed? I'm looking for a missing great grandfather. My mother tested as a first cousin for 1 time removed.
Okay, so first cousins share grandparents. So 2 times removed, you would share your grandparents with that person, but it wouldn't be their grandparent, it would be their second great grandparent. because they're farther down on
Right.
that list, but it's still a first cousin. So it's still going to be sharing. It's going to be your grandparents. And that person is, in all likelihood, you're either considerably younger than that person or they're considerably younger than you are.
Okay. That makes sense. Another question. What are some common mistakes beginners make when interpreting shared DNA amounts, and what strategies can help avoid misidentifying relationships?
Well, the first thing is looking at the smaller amounts. When you're looking and it says that this person is probably your father, that is going to probably be correct. It's a high amount of DNA, and it's unlikely that that is going to be wrong. But once you get down to, we looked at 47 centimorgans, when you get down to the smaller amounts, there are a wide range of things that that person can be. And people will say, well, we share a name. The last name's the same, so this is where the relationship is. Well, if you are from an area that is an endogamous area, the South tends to do that, although I don't really have much. But if you're from an area where you may be related to somebody on more than one line, they may appear to be more closely related to you than they really are. And don't, when my story about John, there's more to that story, but there was a relative of his that we found, and I knew this person. And when I talked to them, I said, well, he can be your half brother, but he could also be your uncle, but he's only 5 years older than you are. So he's not likely to be your uncle. You have to look at those things with more than just the numbers. You've got to analyze it.
Very good. Here's another question for you. Can you explain why siblings only share 50% of their parents' DNA?
Okay, you've got an egg here, you got a sperm here. Each one of them has 23 chromosomes. When they create an egg, when they create what is it? I can't even remember the term.
Embryo?
But when they come together, they're going to split in half. So you're only going to get half from one and half from the other. Otherwise, you'd be a clone. If you got all from your mother, then you would be a clone of your mother. If you got all from your father, you would be a clone. And you don't have 46 chromosomes, you only have 23. So the way it works is it splits in half, and this works through all mammals. I won't generalize it to every other thing, but you get half, the sperm and the egg have half of the chromosomes of each of the parents. So you lose the other half.
So this is another refresher question. Again, what's the difference between second cousin and first cousin once removed?
Okay, you're talking about a generation difference. Second cousins are on the same generation. They are children of a first cousin who are children of a sibling. First cousins, once removed, one of them is the child of the siblings, and the other is the grandchild of the sibling. Did that make it even more difficult to understand? As I was saying it, I'm not sure that was any clearer than without diagramming. It's so much fun to try to say what it is.
No, I understand that.
They're basically different generations is what the difference is when you talk about removing. You're talking about, and the first number, whether they're a first cousin, whatever amount removed, is how that if they were on the same generation, how they would be related. And then if they are a removed generation, they are a child of that person.
This is a follow-up to the half the DNA question.
Okay.
But shouldn't each sibling have the same DNA profile?
No. First of all, I sure didn't look like my sister. I'm 5'6". My sister was 5'1". As you know, we aren't twins. So we don't have the same DNA. You're looking at all of those 23 chromosomes, which there are two of them. So there are 46 chromosomes. They are all in the great big, and then they also have this recombination thing so that they're not, you don't get all of one chromosome. When a person has two chromosomes and it splits, part of it may go this way and part of it may go that way. So you don't get all of the same, but you only get half. And every time your mom got pregnant, there's a new pool that DNA comes from. And it's a new handful that creates that child.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Isn't it? Isn't it? And you know what? I wish I knew all this when I was in college and took all this DNA and didn't understand it.
Well, now it's practical to you.
Yes, yes, it is practical to me, but it sure didn't when I took cell biology my first year of college, which is basically what this is.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's another question. It's a little bit lengthy. My maternal grandfather claimed he was from Hartford, Connecticut, and supposedly he was born in 1892. But I have not been able to find any records for his family. I have found some ancestors in England that I share DNA with, but I can't find any census records with him. He did marry his first wife in Missouri and then his second wife in Montana, so I always wonder if he lied about where he was born. Do you have any suggestions for where I should look for his family?
Well, my first suggestion is to go to Family Search and use their full text search and search for him and see if he's in some hidden records. That's what I do to start with. But if I were using DNA, now what relationship did she say this person was?
My maternal grandfather.
Okay, that's not too bad because if you can test, you're going to want to test the oldest person. So if you've got anyone in a generation above you, if you have an aunt, an uncle, or a parent that you can test, that will put it closer. But I would use DNA and I would look and see if you can find some people that match that. There should be, since it's in the United States, especially if you're testing in with ancestry, you're going to find matches who descend from either him. But if you're looking at a grandparent, you're going to want to look at second cousins and find out whether you have any second cousins who are at that DNA range.
Mhm. The last question that I see is, where can we find the last webinar you did on DNA? I'm assuming they mean the one that you did with us, which was back
Yeah.
in January, and we had it on file for a month, and then it disappears. That's our agreement with our speakers, that we keep it for a month. So that is no longer available through Hartford County. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
you have something else for another
I
resource
don't have
someplace
any
else.
online, but I'll tell you what I would suggest is we just had Roots Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to Roots Tech and do a search, it'll give you a list of all the of a web page where you can search all of the webinars for about the last 5 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
you can click on DNA and you will see a lot of DNA webinars that you can choose. Diane Southern has quite a few. I love hers. She is so fun to listen to. And she does a great job. But there are other people who have done DNA webinars that are all posted on Roots Tech. And there's a lot from 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's Roots, ROOTS Tech.
Right. ROOTSTECH.
Yep.
And you will find just numerous DNA webinars to look at.
Mhm, mhm. I don't see any more questions. Do you have anything to leave us with?
Well, as I said, test your oldest relatives. Be sure you get them before they die because, you know, as we said, you might have a hairbrush, but at this point, it's not really a viable thing to do. You want to test those oldest relatives. And if you test your siblings, you're going to get greater coverage.
Mhm.
So I do have both my sister and brother tested, and that gives me a greater coverage. And you want to try doing that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that advice. So at this point in time, I'm going to say we're going to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I also want to announce that we're going to be hosting two very special semi-quincentennial virtual programmings this summer that will aid you in finding your American Revolutionary patriots. So information is going to be coming out on our website in the next few weeks. So look for that special America 250 Harvard programs that are listed there. So we have two different programs coming up for that. And as a reminder, this performance was recorded and will be available along with that handout at hcplonline.org on the HCPL Universe page through April the 24th. Don't forget that quick survey at the end of the credits. We really do use your input to find topics for our virtual genealogy programming that we give you. So it's time well spent, and we really do appreciate it. So thank you so much. Thank you again, Jamie, for joining us again. We
Thank
appreciate your
you for
time.
having me. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. Everyone else have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.